All right. So maybe Dan, can you tell me, Dan, what the title, how you say the title of the book, Tukhone, and explain what it means? I'm assuming it's an Lenape word.
Yep. It's actually from the Unami dialect. So my people are Turtle Clan, and most of the Lenape spoken in Ontario is Munsee, which is a sort of different nation within the Lenapes. It's the Wolf Clan. So this is taken from the Unami dialect. It's as close as a translation of the traditional word for Windsor, Detroit, which is Wawiyangatanong. This is Tukhone, which is the Unami word for it, it really just means it's where the shore is narrow, which is, the river bends and the shore is narrow. That's really what Wawiyangatanong means. It also means where the water flows opposite to the way it should and yet still does, and it's magical. Wawiyangatanong is a really sort of bigger medicinal term, where Tukhone is the only thing I know that could capture that. So that's where the title for the book comes from. And that's why we have that subtitle. That's what Marty Gervais was like, dude, you got to put a subtitle on there. So we did.
Thanks, that's great. The impression I had first was an incredible blending of things, like you're talking about rust, moonbirds, all in the same little bit, sunlight through mimosas. Then you've got Native Americans, white settlers, Afro-Americans. The land is and the lives are constantly in process. And you bind all of this together in your book. And I'm wondering where you imagine this menage is going to next. Where's this process going to?
So I think often when I think about the literature that I studied, or even the moving parts of the many world cultures that I've studied, cosmopolitanism is sort of at its center. And obviously growing up in Windsor, I wasn't born here, but I grew up here. It's one of the most multicultural cities in Canada. It's one of those places where you go for a walk and you hear like 7 different languages. I think the only other community in this area that's like that is Hamtramck, Michigan, which I also have a special affinity for. But the idea that sort of putting all these different cultural engines into play really sort of amplifies sort of a healing process, because it's creating space for everybody. It's try to like draw the best possible. It's cosmopolitanism. So I think when I look back, my first thesis director at Indiana University, his name was Don Belton, and he was a scholar of Black history, of cosmopolitan literature. So we spent a lot of time actually discussing sort of New York in the 50s and 60s, and then looked a lot at Left Bank Paris. And I see that sort of mixing of cultures as sort of the best way that we can move forward, the best way that we can sort of merge our songs. I often think about hip hop, especially indigenous hip hop, as a great example of that. Rolling Stone, this was back around the time of Standing Rock, said the only real hip hop being recorded now is indigenous hip hop. And it's that idea that we can all learn from each other. So I'm Lenape, but I'm speaking English. I have a master's of fine arts in English. That tells you there's already that sort of cultural bend. I also got into the States. That makes it even weirder, right? So we just kind of keep going. But the idea that all these cultures touched, and they always have here. So Wawiyangatanong and Tukhone, which is where the book is set, is originally home to the Three Fires Confederacy, which was 3 different nations: the Potawatomi, the Odawa, and the Anishinaabe. So, or the Ojibwe, sorry, Odawa, yeah, I said that right. But this area was already that. And then there were Delawares here as well, so Lenapes. When I say Delaware, the term's sort of interchangeable. There was Foxes, there was, Miamis. We were already a multicultural region. So over time, the nature of the land hasn't necessarily changed. And to sort of continue that legacy forward when you write about a place, to bring all those cultures to the table, because they're part of my experience as well. I don't necessarily, I don't know what it's like to be a Black American or even a Black Canadian, yet their cultures and the way in which we all engage every day is so critical, and their culture is so important to mine now. I'd say that with Arabic culture, Italian, we have so much here, right? So that's a big thing. That kind of answer that?
Absolutely. It's a beautiful answer, actually. I grew up and I was born in Windsor. I understand what you're saying very clearly. It's always been mixed. We're also Seneca and Anishinaabe as well. And it was just a melting pot of, I don't know, everybody who wanted to live in a swamp because it's really swampy there.
The big swamp.
It is. It's a big swamp. But your wordsmithing is beautiful. And in the reading, and this is of all of the books as well, but in your, particularly the last one, your rhythm and your meter of the different languages that are in your writing, you pick up all these different rhythms and meters. I'm so surprised. And I'm going to ask what song you hear next, but part of that is in the next question is something about, you've got the Japanese haiku run in there.
Mhm.
And, you know, so on top of Native Americans, white settlers, Afro-Americans, you've got Japanese meter and rhythm as well, because their rhythm and their meter are very, very structured and very different.
Mhm.
Anyway, what song do you hear next? I mean, you write like you're writing songs in my head.
I'm obsessed with music, and I don't know, my computer's jumping.
Oh.
Right behind me, you can see I have my guitar, and there's a frame drum over there. So I think about music often. There's a record player behind me. It sort of really informs what I do. Musically, I mean, I can tell you, yeah, I'm listening to a lot of. My daughters get me to listen to a lot of dance music, so a lot of Dua Lipa, a lot of Drake, Weekend's on a heavy rotation now, but I'm gonna blame that just because he's awesome. So we're just gonna leave it at that. Musically, I mean, in terms of what's next in terms of a song, it's I've always been. Let me go back to the Japanese traditional form. So my earliest ventures into writing were with Gary Snyder's work, Philip Wallens, and I had a close friend in Indiana named Michael Luis Darrow, who is still a poet. I haven't been in touch with him as recently. Probably one of the best haiku poets that I knew working until of course, I met Terry Ann Carter. But Michael Luis Darrow is one of those guys who really influenced me and sort of taught me the musicality of it. We sat down and he would play Zen flute, and like this is how you find that musicality, that rhythm. So that's where that sort of originates from. Now, obviously, living here, there's a different type of song and rhythm. I can really feel that there's something absent in my life because I spend a lot of time in Toronto. The VIA train goes right past me. I'm up there all the time, and there's that sort of sound that Toronto has, and then Drake and The Weeknd and those guys really use it well, where it's that boom sound. Like they have that. There's that really like low, earthy, shaking sound. And that's something I notice that's coming through in my work. It's a more bassy, deeper sound, something that's more rooted to the land. And I'm missing it because of COVID, because we can't go up there. Detroit has a different sound. It's a very different sort of musicality. It's the sound of the assembly line. We don't stop. 24/7. This is probably the loudest city I've ever lived in my life. It's Windsor, but no one sleeps here. It just keeps going all night, all day. It's the weirdest thing. I obviously lived in Indianapolis and moved here more recently, but that's sort of the difference of sound. And these soundscapes are playing a bigger role. We do have a place that we have land, TP. I know it's making me sound like I'm ridiculous, but I have a TP in Europe. We have a summer residence on Peely. So the difference between those two soundscapes are massive. And I'm really sort of trying to find the musicality of the world around us. So when I'm thinking about this. So I have a book of fiction coming out at the end of the month, and it's a story. It's a whole collection of Indiana stories. There's a different cadence in that. So as I'm working through that, and I had to work through a lot of revisions over the last, obviously 6-7 months to see that cadence, and it's not mine anymore. That cadence came from the land. It was bluegrass. It was sort of a semi-rural Hoosierness put forward in a book. And it's obviously prose, so it's a little different. So really, I moved from Tukhone into that, and now into the next thing. And that next thing is, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I can feel this very strongly. I know what you mean about Windsor and the factory. The assembly lines go all the time. They don't shut down.
Yeah.
What do you want your Lenape people to be saying and singing right now? Do you feel extreme? Is this the connection for you is mostly Lenape? Is that how you feel inside? And if so, what is it that you want them to say and sing?
So I'll start with this. My grandmother was Pearl Peters. She was a residential school survivor at Bradford, and she was one hell of a piano player. She was one of the first. So she went and found her way in the world without being on the right. She had to give up her status. She lived in Leamington. She had my father and quite a few other kids. There's a lot of Lockhart relations in the city. But she's very musical, but that she wasn't the only one. So when I look back at my sort of past, everyone from my stand-in grandmother, because Pearl passed when I was very young. My sort of Kokum, Hazel, she was a great singer. She loved music. There was always music coming in and out of our house. When I was younger, we went to Tennessee all the time. My close uncle was a local country music guy. We have this sort of great musical tradition. My Uncle John would pull out his guitar at every assembly at Moravian Town, and we would sing, but it would be old country music songs or old gospel songs, because we're the descendants of the ones that were saved by the Moravians, right? So there's a musicality, a spirituality, a sort of longer sort of song to us. I'm a little different as opposed to most of my immediate relations, because I was raised in the city. I have more of an interest in the urban sounds, right? I think our real path forward, and I'll go back to the indigenous hip hop, that's our real path forward. I look at artists like Dreezus and Superman, and obviously we lost Brooklyn a couple years ago, but a few years ago now. Geez, I'm getting old. But these are the guys that are sort of a Tribe Called Red, right? Where they're really they're transforming our cultures into the contemporary, because while they've always been that way, they've never been recognized. So when I saw Superman, and he's out west with you guys, he's in Montana, Pro Nation, Absolute Nation. When I saw him put on the fancy dance gear and make that prayer loop song, that changed everything. That let me know that our languages, our cultures are still alive. They're breathing, and that sort of next step is definitely hip hop. It is a more transformative literatures away from trauma porn, because what really goes on with so much of indigenous arts and songs, they want trauma porn. I don't want that. I want Big Daddy Dre. I want him on the back of a horse saying, "Who's gonna ride with me?" Like that's that's the future, and that's the song. Our songs will adapt. Our songs are gonna take. I like, look at The Weeknd. Like he maintains that Arabic. That is in the Pray For Me. It's massive, and I want that sort of inserts. I want Italian storytelling in my storytelling, and I think that we can merge our songs. It's that cosmopolitanism again, right? And it's not just across non-indigenous indigenous lines. There are ways that we can learn from each other. I often think about the Six Nations and the Three Fires. How those two nations can learn from each other. Lenape, we gained much of our cultural knowledge because other nations held on to it for us. So I think that sort of bridging between all these different nations is the way forward. Fundamentally what a powwow is, right? So
yeah. So sometimes you write prose, sometimes poetry. What pushes you into one direction or the other? It's just whatever pops into your head, or is there something that pushes you in one way or another?
So, and honestly, like my proper major was fiction. So my thesis was in fiction, and I think I suffered some trauma going through the whole process of getting an MFA. I mean, to an extent, yes. My thesis director was murdered. Don Cornelius Belton was murdered in a hate crime. And I say that because I don't want that ever forgotten. But Tony Ardezzoni stepped up, and he became my thesis director. And that saved the day, but there was a certain amount of trauma that went with that. I was very successful as a poet before I was as a fiction writer. That's helpful as well. But there are two very different reasons why you approach writing a poem or writing an essay or a work of fiction. For me, a poem is a moment. It's a moment that arises from a satori, like that moment of realization. Again, back to the haiku, right? So when I experience something like, for example, there's a poem in an upcoming manuscript. I don't know if anyone's going to take it or not yet. It's about witnessing bats fly in a figure 8 over Gladstone Street, which is here,
Mhm.
and watching the circle between two trees that were sick. They had the ash, their admiral, the ash borers were in the trees, but just and they were actually flying and doing the infinity loop around, trying to catch little gnats, and it becomes that sort of meditation on what that is. That's the example when you would use a poem, whereas a story arises more from an interest in a character and a place and a series of events. So when I write a story, there's this idea. So in Breaking Right, for example, there's a story. I became sort of very interested in this idea of the working class guy who lived down the street that was trying to build a hot rod to sort of kickstart life. And I was really interested about what all that is and how those characters would play out. So it's difference between world building and world mirroring. Maybe that's the best way to describe it.
Right. Well done. You came back to Detroit and Windsor. This is a place where there's lots of diasporias. People leave. Why are you going back? You may have answered this partially already, but.
Well, I think it was one of the hardest things to do. My wife and I were living in Indianapolis. We're on the east side in Irvington. We loved our community. Still love Indiana. I still find myself saying I'm a Hoosier. But Mike Pence was governor. We discovered we were going to have a girl. We were pregnant, and the issues with sort of women's rights in the U.S. Obviously, the growing violence at that point in time. Pence had mismanaged the state horribly. We were both public servants. I was a librarian. My wife was a high school teacher. It just wasn't safe to stay there. And then we could talk about the student loan crisis, where we were looking at being bankrupt in about 6 years because of student loan debt. And I mean, those were all realistic things. Those are sad things of why we leave. Now, that's why we left. We could have gone anywhere. We came here for one major reason, that's family. There was a way in which we were married in Windsor. We were married in Detroit, actually. So when I have a real problem nowadays differentiating between Windsor and Detroit. I just call it Wowie Yongatonong.
Yeah.
I mean, their families are also intertwined. It's so twisted. This is a really weird time for all of us here.
Yeah. Yeah.
We came back for family, and I'll tell you, the Canada I left in 2001 was very different from when I came back, and it was really hard. We came back in 2013. I don't know more. There were some major overhanging issues. I'm not blaming it on any particular political party. I'm just simply saying it was very different. So yeah, it was, and Windsor was very depressed at that point in time.
Yeah.
It's much different now, but we came back for family. We came back because it was home, and it wasn't very far away from where we were living.
If you were going to ask yourself a question, instead of me asking them, what would you ask? What would you want to say?
Thing I want to say?
Yeah.
You know, I've been struggling with this a lot, and it's about language. So as we're busy in myself, I love languages. I'll start with that. The fact that I often talk about decolonization or the institution of sort of, you can see in the poems, especially I think Tukhone is one of the better examples of the reinstitution of UNAMI into text form. So my question would be, is this enough? What point do we have to keep pushing forward? At what point, so Lenape, there's what, 1,500 of us registered from Moravian to the Thames, maybe another 2,000 at Muncie here in Canada, and then we have sort of a scattered population. Is it possible for us to one day be able to speak our language, to be able to write, to share creatively in our language? The answer is yes, I believe. But is this sustainable? Like, is this something that, I don't know, there's so many questions I have with the language right now. I think that's really, and it's a difficult question because of the metaphorical nature of language, like how important language is to maintaining our culture and building our culture. So we often, and this is one of the things I often want to, this is my high horse. I don't want to hear about maintaining cultures anymore. I want to hear about building our cultures, because our culture should move forward. And I think that language, and maybe if the question might be, is writing in English with a smattering of Unami doing any real help or harm? And I don't know the answer to that, but that's a question I want to ask myself.
Yeah, it's a good question. Lots of philosophical depth in the question about what languages do. Can you even think without a language? What happens with language and without language? It's very profound. I think you already answered the one about, you know, what you would sing today. If you want to add anything to that, that's the last question that I had actually. Like, but I think that you kind of answered it. Maybe you want to add.
Well, what I would say, well, you know, I have been singing Junior Kimbrough. I have a Telecaster over my shoulder there. No. um, you know, I think moving forward, I actually probably will end up performing again. When I was younger, I was in bands. I would like to perform again, primarily at the quarry on. Let's try that one more time, at the quarry on Peely.
Right.
There's a sort of, and I don't mean when we say sing. So for me, I do sing. I sing often. It's a matter of you greet the day when you sing. There's the hand drum that we use for prayers, sort of over my shoulder there. Yeah. I sing often. So, and I sing the songs I know, at least ceremonially, are Ojibwe in nature. I was taught at Trent through Shirley Williams in the language class there. So what I know is very limited Lenape wise. My cousins are much better at that. The song I would like to sing moving forward would be sort of more. I'd like to. I'm really going to be probably more focused on a lot of the Black cultures around Windsor. I often talk about Detroit, but I think that our Black culture in Windsor is grossly ignored by our elites here. I think about Mary Bibb, who I included in Devil in the Woods, as a great Canadian that has no sort of nothing to honor her, but a couple of small notes. TJ Travis is a local artist here who did a lot of work with her stuff. This is someone who should be recognized. These are the people, these are the sort of stories, these are the songs that I want to share. I don't want to take them. I'm working on a novel set in 1849, and it has one of the main characters is a refugee from a Black refugee from the U.S. And I will not refer to them. They were perhaps slaves over there. But they're refugees when they got here. They're free people. So the idea that I want to be able to explore that. And in terms of indigeneity, I think there's a lot of racism towards the Black community from the indigenous community here, which disgusts me. And I want to make sure that those communities can be better merged. Because I don't find that the racism goes one way. I don't know that it goes the other way. I don't think that the Black community is racist towards indigenous people. That's going to get me in trouble, but that's fine. I don't care. I'm usually in trouble.
Pretty much everything can get you in trouble these days, just about.
I'm gonna put Mr. Potato Head on a Dr. Seuss book and see if I can make somebody angry. Anyways, but no, I mean, I think that's the merging of the songs, and I think Arabic culture is we have a lot of them, a lot of different Arabic cultures moving into the city. They have been here for a long time, but I should know those better. And I do know. I play basketball with a lot of the sort of a lot of the different diasporas from those communities. There's better ways to merge us all together, and I think singing together those songs, that's how we do it.
Right. Your book was full of Detroit songs, a lot of them Black, but not all of them. Bob Seger being an exception, of course, in there. But it was amazing to hear the song in unison with the writing, because I think we all do that. The songs still stay in your head. And then there's the writing, and then there's the song, and it's like, wow. Like,
I have to try to find it because I did a reading for Whistler Writers Festival.
Okay.
We'll perform 3 of those high bun with a full band.
Right.
So it was fun to do that because it played with that musicality, right? And it was actually all going on in the background. So as a sort of side note, when I was writing these, it was during the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, and WDET, which is Detroit's NPR station, was doing the best of Detroit music. And it was funny because I'd already gotten some of the early sketches done before the pandemic came down. And to be able to hear it while you're writing these was sort of absolutely fantastic. So there's a playlist too on Spotify, which I've never advertised, and maybe I should, but
yeah, maybe. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's it, Adam. Is that it for you, Dan? Do you have something that you want to add, or
Um,
I hope we can do this again. Hey, do you have your book? Can you hold it up?
Oh yeah, hold on. I got a book. I got like 5. How many I don't have Tukhone? I have one around here. I just gotta grab it. Ah, there it is.
It was an incredible read for me. I loved everything about it. That the blending of it just it was singing and talking all at the same time, and it was really magic for me. I was like, oh, I miss Windsor. I want to go. I want to go. Of course, I can't go, but I wanted to go. I was like, I want to go home.
We'll get you back here.
Great.
The food scene's getting better. Although housing prices are insane. For,
Oh, yes.
and a special thanks to Marty Gervais. I'm serious. The guy took a heck of a risk publishing a book of haiku and haibun, and to even do it with like the native calendar. I don't know. That was pretty cool. So he puts up with me sometimes.
Brave souls around. It's a time for brave souls, anyway.
Oh yeah. Well, we need them. And Micheline's bringing out Frontenac House is bringing out. I have a novel and poems coming out, so that's that should be interesting.
I heard a little bit because I'm like a Nespotic insider, so
I'm sure she's kind.
Occasionally, I hear a little bit.
She's like, "What are you doing?" Like, I don't know. There's Simon Gertie and Tecumseh making lots of appearances, so it's pretty weird.
It would be fantastic if you can come out. Thank you very much for doing this. Hopefully we get to do this again really soon.
Absolutely.
I don't know, something, another book, whatever, whatever it is.
Hopefully I'll get a chance to come out west. I miss you guys out west. That's
Got lots of room and lots of place for you. Lots of hungry people who could use some magic.
We need some shot. I mean, once we get our science magic in our arms, we can get out there. So
yeah, like I'll take you out to some to a nice Cree sweat.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I haven't been in a sweat for. I think Montana was the last time I was in a sweat.
Yeah.
But it's been a minute, as they would say in Indiana, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay.
Well, awesome. I really appreciate you guys taking the time today.
Oh, I appreciate you saying yes. Thank you. I see your, I don't know, to produce this many books in that amount of time. You must do, I don't know how you fit it all in, because I know you also have a daughter that you spend a lot of time with, but.
Well, my wife doesn't work. So she works at home. She's a teacher at home. And I was really lucky until the last year I got to just do this full time. So I'm probably going back to full-time writing, no offense to what else I've been doing, but full-time writing in my own small press. So it gives me enough time to do the things I got to do.
Yeah. How is that doing anyway? How's your press doing? Has it just kind of shut down, or is it still?
Urban Farmhouse Press is gone nuts. We haven't like published as many books, but the books that we published are selling like gangbusters right now. We just released the small mammoths, the very small mammoths of Wrangell Island, by Craig Finley, and he's from South Bend, Indiana. We went to graduate school together. There are these amazing meditative prose poems.
Oh.
He's going through a lot of mental health issues during the book writing, where he actually does contemplate suicide, but it doesn't go that far down the road. He is a librarian and now in Southern Oklahoma. He is a phenomenal writer. I'm very sad he didn't get to the MFA programs he wanted, but his book is a testament to how good he is. And then we have a novel called Motel Man, which you might dig a lot because it's Bob Campbell, and it's a lot of writing about the auto industry and racism, and it really deals specifically with Flint. It's called Motown Man because it's the nickname, but great. They're fun books to bring out because they can bring out writers on both sides of the border. Sales go well. There's not a lot of small presses in the States have folded. So
yes, can you tell us the name of your press and?
Oh, sorry. Urban Farmhouse Press is the name of the press.
Yeah, and how to reach it even?
urbanfarmhousepress.ca. All of our books are available through Ingram, Amazon, all that fun stuff. So it's been around for what, 7 years now. 7 years. I'm gonna go with 7 years. It's been a little while. We started in Indiana, we moved it up here, and we published some really phenomenal writers, including Marty Gervais. Is one of the more big names we recently published. So Benjamin Golyubov. We focus a lot on sort of rooted literature literature that talks about the places it comes from, but could also be sort of exported across borders. It's a good deal. That's what I would say. I'm happily writing. I'm doing currently doing a history of the Detroit River for Biblioasis, and finishing up a manuscript of river essays. So where we decolonize the rivers around here and give them back their traditional names. I often think of Dishkon Zibi, which is the Thames River, Kikwenem Sipu, which is the River Kennard or Duck River.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of them. So they're good stuff to work on.
Fantastic.
And I'm still keeping myself alive with coffee, so that's good.
You're running on coffee, are you? Okay. Okay, blessings.
Yes. Well, as we say, okay, I'd say this multiple ways. Anushik is Lenape for thank you. Miigwech, we know that one, right?
Yeah, I do.
People with the cool kids out east here, it's Migs. You got to say Migs Nijis, which means thanks, cousins.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Migs is short for Miigwech. Nij is short for cousins, which is what you call everyone.
Yes.
So Niji is cousin. So Nij, Migs Nij. That's what you got to. Cool.
All right.
Or what's the Lenape? Well, no, we don't have goodbye. So we have Lepe Kanawich, which is a command. I will see you again. Like Klingon.
Yeah, it starts getting interesting when you start reading the First Nations, any of them, literary translations, and they take their words, and there's like really no words in English for their word, except a big long phrase of some sort.
It was the Cree, Swampy Cree for computer. It was hydroelectric worker that comes into my house and talks to me. It was like this long.
Yeah.
It's in one of the University of Regina books that they brought up, but we studied it at Trent too, and it was one of those language is metaphorical. It doesn't,
Right.
I mean,
That's interesting. I would probably like it a whole lot better if the hydroelectric worker actually did come in and talk to me right about now, because there'd be a human involved.
Get in here. Get in here. With VR, man. You use some VR. It'll make you feel like you're talking to something.
No kidding. Oh, that's for sure. All right. Adieu, everybody. Thank you so kindly.
Shelley,